Trump administration continues to carry out its immigration crackdown. American farmers are facing a labor crisis.
I got to farm with my dad every day. It's a way of life. It's a wonderful way of life. And it's at risk. And it shouldn't be.
But the shutdown also closed the agency that distributes that funding, as Trump is now teasing another kind of bailout.
A potential bumper crop of corn actually has corn growers a little bit worried this year. I'm Katrina Markle in Saunders County, where Dan Wesley, a veteran farmer, told me that his industry needs to find more markets for their product.
This is awful discouraging. You know, we do our very best to grow a good crop to feed the world, and then we can't hardly give it.
It's the largest consumer, producer, and exporter of corn in the world.
Well, if you're wondering why farmers are so concerned about their farm finances right now, they really just can't catch a break. It's not just because corn prices are below break even for most. It's the fact input prices are so high.
I never thought I was going to lose this much money this fast.
Drought-like conditions have growers worried about this year's crops, especially corn.
One farm in Springville is hurting after severe storms last week. KCRG TV9's Lacey Reeves tells us about the damage at Knight's Farm.
Tariffs start to go into effect. Retaliations could impact Iowa farmers. KCRG TV9's Lacey Reeves explains the potential impact of these tariffs on Iowa's agriculture industry.
The world did not expect this. Markets didn't expect it. Washington definitely didn't expect it. But as the sun rises over Africa's rapidly expanding corn belt, an economic shockwave is rippling across the globe with a force no expert predicted. The global food market has suddenly tilted, and at the center of this unexpected disruption is Africa. Yes, Africa rewriting the rules of global agriculture in real time. It started quietly. A new wave of investment in high-yield seeds, irrigation systems, climate-smart farming, and massive grain storage networks began transforming rural communities across East, West, and Southern Africa. For years, analysts dismissed these developments as small gains, but those small gains multiplied, scaled, and then exploded. What was once gradual progress has now turned into a continental boom, a boom powerful enough to threaten the United States' long-standing dominance in global corn exports. And now the alarm bells are ringing. Across American farming towns, from the Midwest to the Central Plains, grain silos are filling faster than buyers can be found. Prices are falling, farmers are panicking. Export projections are being torn up and rewritten every week as buyers from Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Europe shift their contracts toward African suppliers offering better prices, fresher produce, and faster delivery times. This isn't a small hiccup. This is a market shock, one with billions of dollars at stake. For decades, U.S. farmers enjoyed a comfortable sense of dominance, confident that global buyers would always favor American corn due to its volume, consistency, and long-standing relationships. But everything has changed. Africa's new corn surge is undercutting prices, expanding supply, and charming global demand with a freshness and quality that experts once claimed the continent could never produce at scale. Suddenly, the U.S. is facing a historic challenge from a region they never imagined would become a major competitor. Inside global commodity exchanges, traders are scrambling, algorithms built on decades of predictable U.S. output are malfunctioning, charts are dipping in directions analysts warned about but never believed would actually happen. Every headline coming out of the global agricultural market feels like a dramatic plot twist. Africa overtakes major markets in export volume, African shipping routes streamline distribution networks, African corn prices hit record highs. The shock isn't only economic, it's political. Policymakers in Washington are calling emergency meetings. Lobbyists are flooding Capitol Hill demanding bailouts, subsidies, and temporary support packages to keep American farms alive. In the agricultural heartland, farmers are pleading for intervention as they watch shiploads of African corn being welcomed by eager buyers in China, the way, Saudi Arabia, India, Brazil, and even parts of Europe. Farmers who once dominated these contracts are now struggling to find consistent buyers willing to pay profitable rates. The situation is spiraling and the tension is rising. Meanwhile, on the African side, optimism is overflowing. Roads are buzzing with trucks carrying freshly harvested grain to newly built processing hubs. Ports are expanding to handle record-breaking shipping volumes. Local economies are awakening with new jobs, new investments, and new opportunities that were unimaginable a decade ago. This isn't luck, it's strategy. African nations have spent years strengthening agricultural reforms, attracting foreign investment, and empowering local farmers with technology, modern equipment, and training programs. The result is a golden moment no one can ignore. What makes the situation even more dramatic is the growing narrative across global media. Africa is feeding the world. It is a phrase once used as a sarcastic jab by critics who doubted the continent's capacity to achieve agricultural dominance, but today it is a headline backed by numbers, exports, and undeniable momentum. Africa's corn boom has cracked open a new era, one where African nations are no longer seen as dependent importers, but as large-scale producers reshaping the global food supply chain. Behind closed doors, U.S. analysts are raising an uncomfortable question. Is this the beginning of the end of America's agricultural supremacy? It's a question no one wanted to ask but can no longer avoid. Some fear this could mirror the collapse of U.S. dominance in manufacturing, tech hardware, and steel industries once considered untouchable until foreign competitors overtook them with speed and precision. Now the same threat looms over U.S. agriculture, and Africa is the source of this historic shift. Corn is not just a crop, it's the backbone of livestock feed, processed foods, industrial materials, ethanol production, and global food security. When a country controls corn, it controls leverage in global trade negotiations. For decades, the U.S. wielded this power effortlessly, but the rise of Africa's corn empire is changing everything, redistributing influence, reshaping alliances, and shaking the very foundation of agricultural power structures that have existed for nearly a century. Some U.S. farmers are calling this a nightmare. Others describe it as the biggest agricultural crisis in a generation. But in Africa, it is being celebrated as a breakthrough, a long-awaited moment where the continent finally steps into its potential, proving to the world that it can lead in production, innovation, and global supply. The contrast is striking, one continent struggling to hold on to its past and another racing confidently into the future. Global investors are shifting billions toward African agribusiness. Multinational buyers are locking in long-term contracts. Food security organizations are praising Africa's surge as a stabilizing force in a time of global uncertainty. And while U.S. farmers are sounding alarms, African farmers are expanding fields, upgrading machinery, and scaling operations to meet the skyrocketing demand. This is a story of unexpected power, a story of global realignment, a story of how Africa turned a historic disadvantage into a competitive edge strong enough to shake the world's largest agricultural giant. The crisis is real, the panic is global, and the boom is unstoppable. Because for the first time in modern history, Africa is not waiting for permission, validation, or approval. Africa is seizing the market, Africa is setting the price, and Africa is forcing the world, including the United States, to adjust. This is the dawn of a new agricultural era, and the world is watching in disbelief as Africa's corn boom rewrites the global power map. The global agricultural market has entered uncharted territory. The shift sparked by Africa's corn boom is no longer a temporary disruption, it is becoming the new normal. As the weeks turn into months, the aftershocks continue spreading, exposing weaknesses, intensifying political tension, and rewriting economic expectations in ways that were once considered impossible. What began as a regional rise is now a continental transformation with irreversible momentum. In major U.S. farming states, panic has evolved into frustration and frustration into pressure. Farmers are gathering in town halls demanding answers that Washington doesn't seem ready to provide. Banks are quietly tightening lending conditions. Fertilizer and equipment suppliers are reporting reduced orders. Farms that once thrived unpredictable export cycles are being forced to renegotiate contracts, cut production, or take on debt just to stay afloat. The sense of stability that shaped American agriculture for generations is slipping away. Every major U.S. agricultural report now contains the same warning. Foreign buyers are diversifying, prices are unstable, and market share is shrinking faster than projections can keep up. Import-dependent nations are sending delegations to African capitals instead of American agricultural hubs. Trade officials who spent decades strengthening ties with U.S. suppliers are suddenly pivoting toward African producers, offering new incentive packages, cheaper transport routes, and expanded export capacity. Shippers operating across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans are redirecting vessels to new African ports equipped with modern grain terminals, automated systems, and improved logistics. These ports, many financed through a mix of public investment and international partnerships, are quickly becoming global gateways for agricultural exports. For the first time, Africa is not struggling to export, it is struggling to keep up with the massive demand. At global trade summits, Africa's agricultural representatives are attracting attention that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Instead of being viewed as dependent participants, they have become central players offering what the world desperately needs: stable, large-scale, affordable grain in an era of geopolitical tension, climate disruption, and rising food insecurity. The continent's corn boom has turned it into a strategic powerhouse, capable of influencing global prices and shaping international food policy. Meanwhile, within the United States, political pressure is mounting. Agricultural committees are clashing over what solutions to implement. Some demand emergency subsidies to help farmers stay solvent, others push for aggressive trade negotiations, while a growing number argue that American agriculture must innovate faster or risk falling even further behind. The debate is becoming fierce, polarizing, and highly public. Every week brings new headlines about farm closures, declining profits, and export contracts shifting overseas. Farmers, once confident that the U.S. would always dominate global markets, now feel blindsided. They are questioning why officials ignored early warnings about Africa's emerging agricultural reforms. The signs were there: improved harvest technologies, ballooning yields, large-scale irrigation projects, and the rapid expansion of mechanized farming across key African regions. But the U.S. treated these developments as minor progress instead of a strategic threat. Now the consequences are unavoidable. As the crisis deepens, a second wave of economic effects is beginning to appear. Food processing companies, livestock farms, and ethanol producers are struggling with price volatility. Some are turning to Africa for cheaper imports, creating a sensitive political dilemma. American companies buying African corn while American farmers watch their crops spoil in storage. The tension is boiling, sparking debates about loyalty, economics, and survival. Global media outlets are amplifying the story. Documentaries, investigative reports, and economic analyses are digging deeper into Africa's remarkable rise. They highlight young farmers embracing digital tools, governments investing in agricultural programs, and new partnerships bringing cutting-edge science to fields that were once overlooked. The world is learning that Africa's agricultural transformation is not an accident. It is the result of strategy, investment, and ambition. Foreign investors are taking note. Billions of dollars are flowing into African agribusiness. Startups are creating satellite-based crop monitoring systems, AI-powered soil analysis tools, and automated irrigation solutions. Private companies are leasing vast acres of land to build industrial farms with yields that match or exceed those in the United States. Venture capital firms see Africa not as a risky frontier but as the world's next agricultural growth engine. This investor confidence is fueling something even more powerful: local pride and local empowerment. Communities once marginalized are now building livelihoods around agriculture. Rural areas are expanding with new infrastructure, new schools, and new commerce centers. Farmers are gaining access to training programs, loan facilities, and export networks that were unrealistic even a decade ago. The corn boom is creating ripple effects that reach far beyond the crop itself. It is lifting entire communities and reshaping national economies. But as Africa rises, old global powers are feeling the pressure. Agricultural lobbies in Europe and the United States are warning that their industries are at risk. Market analysts are predicting long-term changes in global trade flows. Strategic food reserves are being recalculated. Insurance companies are revising risk models. The world is repositioning itself in response to Africa's dominance, and every major economic player is being forced to adapt. There is also a growing realization that this shift is not temporary. Climate models show that Africa's potential for corn production may continue expanding as new technologies offset historical challenges. Research institutions are discovering drought-resistant varieties perfectly suited for African climates. Global climate volatility is reducing yields in other major agricultural regions, making Africa even more valuable as a reliable supplier. The future is tilting in Africa's favor. On the geopolitical stage, the conversation is changing. African leaders are gaining new leverage in trade negotiations, presenting themselves not as aid recipients but as key suppliers in the global food chain. Countries that once dictated terms are now seeking partnerships, access, and cooperation. Africa's newfound agricultural strength is giving it a louder voice in international forums, and that voice is reshaping global policy discussions. The U.S., watching its influence slip, is scrambling to reposition itself. Diplomatic teams are rushing to secure new agreements. Agricultural officials are promising reforms. Research centers are calling for massive innovation and modernization, but the world has moved fast, much faster than the U.S. expected, and catching up will not be easy. Africa's corn boom has created a new reality. A reality where a once overlooked continent is now at the center of global agriculture. A reality where old powers must adjust to new competition. A reality where economic might is being redistributed in unpredictable ways. This is the turning point, the moment when the world realizes that Africa's rise is not a trend, not a phase, and not an exaggeration. It is a transformation, it is permanent, and it is only the beginning.